Picture an ocean. Now drain the water out of it. Fill it instead with grass taller than your head, grass that moves in waves when the wind comes through, grass that whispers and hisses and never, ever stops making sound. Add a sky so big it makes you dizzy to look at it. Add wind that blows for 9 days straight without pausing to breathe. Add winters that can freeze a man solid between his barn and his front door, a distance of 50 feet. Add fire that moves faster than a horse can run. That's the American prairie in 1870. The most fertile soil on the planet and one of the most dangerous places a human being ever tried to call home. A place where you could break ground on your own land in the morning. Land, actual land, more land than your entire family ever owned in the old country. And by evening realize that the land might kill you for the privilege. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists riding past on the new railroad, looking out the window at the pretty grass. We're living it. 1 full year, 1 person, everything they would have seen, smelled, heard and survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just lying there in the dark, wide awake, quietly grateful that you will never have to eat cornmeal mush for the 90th consecutive day in a house made of dirt. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. The first thing you need to understand is that you are alone, and the wagon that brought you here is leaving. You stand in grass up to your chest, holding everything you own, and you watch the freighter turn his oxen around. He doesn't look back. His wheels crush a dark line through the grass, and the grass slowly stands back up behind him, and within an hour there is no line at all. No road, no trace, just you, a pile of boxes, a plow, a crate of chickens, and 160 acres of Dakota Territory that the United States government has promised will be yours if you can survive on it for 5 years. Your name is Niels Haugen. You're 19 years old. You left a fjord farm in Norway 11 months ago because that farm, split between your father and his brothers and their sons, had shrunk to a strip of rocky soil that could not feed one more mouth, and you were the one more mouth. You crossed the Atlantic in steerage, 10 weeks of vomit and salt pork and dark water slamming the hull beside your ear. You worked a winter in a Wisconsin lumber camp to earn the price of a plow, a rifle, a barrel of flour, and a filing fee of $18. $18. That's what it costs to claim a piece of the earth here. The Homestead Act of 1862 says any citizen, or anyone who intends to become one, can have a quarter section of public land, 160 acres. In Norway, a man with 160 acres would be nearly a lord. Here, you're not a lord. Here you are a speck. Turn in a full circle. Go on, there is nothing. Not a tree, not a fence, not a roof line, not a church spire. The nearest neighbour, you were told at the land office in Yankton, is a Bohemian family 4 miles east. The nearest town, a depot, a store, a saloon, and a grain buyer, is 14 miles south. The nearest doctor is 30. You have never in your life stood in a place where you could not see something built by human hands. Your eyes keep searching the horizon for it. A steeple, a chimney, anything. The way a tongue keeps finding the hole where a tooth used to be. The wind pushes against you like a living thing. It smells of crushed green stems and warm dirt and something underneath. Something faintly sweet and rotten. Last year's grass, dead beneath the new growth, composting in the heat. You will learn that smell so well you stop noticing it. You will learn every smell out here, because there are so few of them, and each one means something. Rain coming smells like metal. Fire coming smells like burnt bread. A dead ox smells like the end of everything. Right now you can't stand here smelling the wind because it is the 4th of May, and you have no house, and the last frost is barely behind you, and every single day between now and October is a coin you must spend perfectly or starve in February. That is the arithmetic of the prairie, and it's the only arithmetic that matters here. Not money, days. You have roughly 150 of them before the cold comes back. In that time you must build a shelter, break enough sod to plant, dig a well or find water, cut hay for animals you don't own yet, and put up food for a winter you cannot yet imagine. So you take off your coat and you pick up the spade and you start digging your own grave-shaped hole in the side of a low rise, because the first house you will ever own is going to be a hole in the ground. They call it a dugout. You dig into the slope, 6 feet deep, 10 feet wide, 12 feet long, and the prairie itself becomes 3 of your 4 walls. The spade bites through the sod on top and stops. Your arms jolt. The shock travels up through your wrists into your shoulders. You've dug soil before, good Norwegian soil, potato soil. This is not that. The top 8 inches of the prairie is a solid mat of roots. Thousands of years of grass growing and dying and growing, woven so tight that men break plow blades on it. They don't call it soil here. They call it sod, and they talk about it the way sailors talk about the sea, with respect and a little hatred. You dig for 4 days. Your palms blister, the blisters burst, the raw skin underneath weeps and sticks to the spade handle, and you wrap your hands in strips of your spare shirt and keep digging. At night you sleep under the wagon box you bought second-hand, wrapped in a blanket, and you listen. That's the thing nobody warned you about. The prairie is never silent. The grass hisses. Things move through it. You hear the dry rustle of bodies you cannot see, and your mind offers you wolves, and it is usually only a jackrabbit. But your heart doesn't know that, and it hammers against your ribs in the dark while the wind moans over the wagon box, like something asking to be let in. By the 4th evening, you have your hole. You lay cottonwood poles across the top, hauled from the creek 2 miles north, dragged one at a time, your shoulder rubbed bloody by the rope, and over the poles you stack slabs of the sod you cut, grass side down, like enormous filthy bricks, each one weighing 50 pounds, until the roof is 2 feet thick, a door of packed brush and a scrap of canvas, and that's it. That's home. It is dark inside even at noon. It smells of earth and root and worm, a cellar smell, a smell you will breathe every night for years. Dirt sifts constantly from the ceiling, into your hair, your food, your bed. When it rains hard, the roof will drip mud for 3 days after the sky has cleared. Snakes will come through the walls. You will wake one August morning with a bull snake, 5 feet long, coiled in the warm ashes of your stove, and you will learn to be grateful it wasn't a rattler. But when you finally crawl inside on that first night, out of the wind stops. For the first time in weeks, the pushing hands are gone. The silence in your ears is so sudden it rings. You lie down on a mattress of cut grass, and you stare at the black poles of your ceiling, and something in your chest unclenches, and you understand something that no one in Norway could have told you. Out here, walls are not architecture. Walls are mercy. Welcome to Dakota Territory, May 1870. And this was the easy part. Morning comes at 4:30, and it comes through the canvas door as a grey smear, and you're up before it because the sod is waiting. Breaking sod. Say those two words to any old settler and watch their face change. This is the work that defines your first year, the work that decides whether you eat next winter, and it is the hardest physical labour you have ever done or will ever do. You hitch your 2 oxen, Brighton Duke, bought in Yankton for $110, more than every other thing you own combined, to the breaking plow, and you set the share into the edge of that root mat, and you speak to the oxen, and they lean into the yoke, and the world tears. That's the sound. Tearing. Not the soft turning whisper of a plough in old country loam. The prairie sod rips open with a sound like heavy cloth being torn by a giant, a long ripping groan that runs up the plough beam and through the wooden handles into your hands and up your arms and into your teeth. The plough bucks. It jumps when it hits the thick roots, and the handles slam sideways into your ribs, and you learn within 1 hour to keep your body loose and your grip firm, because a man who fights the plough rigid goes home with cracked ribs. There are men on this frontier walking around with fingers that healed crooked because a breaking plough kicked and they were holding it wrong. The furrow rolls over behind you, a ribbon of upside-down prairie, black on top, green crushed underneath, and the smell that comes up out of that opened ground is unlike anything you've known. Dense, sweet, mineral, almost like bread, almost like blood. This soil has never been open to the sky. Not once. Not in 10,000 years. Root and stem and buffalo bone sealed under grass since before your language existed, and you are the first human being ever to turn it. Some evenings you crumble a fistful of it, and it's black all the way through your fingers, black as stove polish, and you think of your father's field in Norway, grey and thin and full of stones, and you almost want to weep at the unfairness of geography. A strong man with good oxen breaks maybe 1/2 acre a day. 1/2 acre. You walk behind that plough 8-10 miles a day in a straight line that goes nowhere. Back and forth, the sun climbing over your right shoulder and setting past your left, and by June you have broken 10 acres, and your body has been rebuilt from the inside. Your hands are not hands anymore. They are tools, cracked, yellow calloused, seamed with black dirt that no washing removes, so stiff in the morning that you flex them open finger by finger, listening to the knuckles pop before you can button your own trousers. Your neck is burned the colour of harness leather. There is a white line across your forehead where your hat sits, and above that line you are still a pale Norwegian boy, and below it you are becoming something else. Into the broken ground you plant sod corn, chopping a slit into each overturned slab with an axe, dropping in 3 kernels, sealing it with your boot heel. Thousands of times. Chop, drop, stamp, chop, drop, stamp. Your lower back becomes one long, dull flame. First-year sod barely grows anything. The slabs haven't rotted yet. The roots underneath are still fighting you, still alive, still trying to be prairie. You know this. Everyone told you this. You plant anyway, because even a poor crop of corn is food for the oxen. And food for the oxen is the difference between ploughing next spring and pulling the plough yourself. And here is the part that presses on you heavier than the labour, heavier than the sod slabs, heavier than anything. No one sees any of it. You work a 12-hour day and no one knows. You do something clever, rig a better hitch, true a crooked furrow, and no one nods. You do something stupid and no one laughs. In Norway, you lived your whole life inside a web of eyes. Family, neighbours, church, the whole valley watching, judging, gossiping, helping. You hated it sometimes. You dreamed of escaping it. Now it is gone, completely gone, and you discover that a man alone starts to come loose from himself. You catch yourself talking to the oxen, full sentences, then full conversations. You tell Duke about your mother's bread. You ask Bright whether he thinks the corn will make. The ox swings his great head and looks at you with one brown eye, chewing, and you realize a week has passed since you heard a human voice, and the last voice was your own, and something cold walks up your spine. They have a word for what happens to some settlers out here later when the doctors write it down. Prairie madness. It takes the women hardest, the ones left alone in the sod houses all day with the wind, that wind that never stops, that hums in the stovepipe, that hisses in the grass, that works on the inside of a skull like water on stone. There are homestead wives in this decade who will stop speaking entirely, who will stand at the door for hours facing east toward everything they left. There are men who will walk into town after a winter alone and be unable to remember how to order flour, standing at the counter with their mouths open, out of practice at being a person. You're 19 and strong, and you tell yourself that will never be you. But on the second Sunday of June, you walk 4 miles east, through grass by compass and sun, no road, no fence, no landmark, but a lone cottonwood, just on the chance the Bohemians are real. They are real. František Novak, 40 years old, arms like fence posts, 6 years on his claim, a proved-up man with a true sod house, cut blocks, real walls, a glass window, a door with hinges, his wife, Marie. 5 children who stop dead and stare at you like you fell out of the sky. And here's the thing you couldn't have predicted. František speaks no Norwegian, and you speak no Czech, and you have perhaps 80 words of English between the two of you, and it does not matter at all. He grips your blooded hand and looks at your palms and says a word in Czech that needs no translation. And Marie puts food in front of you, dumplings, actual bread, a fried egg. And you have to stop eating for a moment and look at the wall, because your eyes are stinging and you're not going to cry in front of the Bohemians. František walks you out at dusk and stands with you at the edge of his corn, and he gives you the first lesson of the country in broken English, with gestures. He points at the sky, at the grass, at the horizon, and he says, slow, so you understand. Prairie not hate you. Prairie not love you. Prairie not know you here. He lets that sit. Then he points at his own eye, then at the western horizon and says the sentence you will remember for the rest of your life. Watch the sky. Sky tell you everything. Man who not watch sky, prairie bury him, and grass grow over. 1 year. Gone. You walk the 4 miles home in the dark with a loaf of Marie's bread under your arm like treasure, following the stars the way you did on the fjord, and behind you the tiny orange spark of the Novak's window burns in an ocean of black, the only human light in any direction. And you understand that a neighbour at 4 miles is not a neighbour at 4 miles. A neighbour at 4 miles is a rope thrown to a drowning man. You will need that rope sooner than you think. But first, in the last week of June, you make your first trip to town because the flour barrel is speaking to you. You can hear the scoop scraping wood at the bottom now, and a man who waits until the barrel is empty to travel 14 miles has already made his mistake. 14 miles behind oxen is a full day. You start in the dark at 3. The wagon groaning and jolting over ground that has never been graded, following a trail that is nothing but the memory of other wheels. two faint parallel lines of bruised grass wandering south. The oxen walk at 2.5 miles an hour, and nothing on this earth will make them walk faster. You learn what every settler learns on this road. The trip is the price. You will pay this day, both ways, for everything you ever buy, forever, until the day a railroad spur comes closer, and men out here talk about railroad rumours the way they talk about rain. Town, when it finally lifts out of the heat shimmer at midday, is a shock in both directions at once. After 8 weeks of grass, the sight of buildings, actual vertical wooden buildings, maybe 24 of them, raw yellow lumber not yet weathered grey, false fronts propped up against the sky like stage scenery, hits you with a physical relief, a loosening behind the eyes, and at the same time you see it for what it is, a splinter, a row of shacks on a mud street beside a railroad track, the whole thing younger than your boots, the depot, a grain buyer's shed, a general store, a land office, a saloon with its door open, breathing out the smell of spilled beer and sawdust into the noon heat. A blacksmith, and the ringing of his hammer reaches you 1/4 mile out. Tang, 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 and you realise you've not heard one single man-made sound besides your own in 51 days, and that ringing lands on your ear like music. The store is a universe. Understand what a frontier general store is. It is the entire material world, compressed into one room that smells of coffee beans, kerosene, new leather, vinegar, cheese, and plug tobacco all at once. A smell so dense and layered that you stand in the doorway for a moment just breathing it. Barrels of crackers and pickles, bolts of calico, boots hanging from the ceiling on strings, pitchforks, pane glass, quinine, gunpowder, peppermint sticks, hymnals. You trade careful and slow, counting your coins twice in your pocket before you show them, and the storekeeper, a Vermonter with sleeve garters and a pencil behind his ear, who came west with the rails and will die rich, treats you exactly as seriously as he treats the man buying 10 times as much, because he knows something you will only understand years later. The country is betting on you. Every merchant, every railroad, every land officer on this line is betting that boys like you will turn grass into wheat, and wheat into freight, and freight into towns. You are not a customer, you are the crop. At the counter you hear English spoken fast for the first time in months, and Norwegian too. There are more Scandinavians on this frontier every season. Whole church congregations transplanted alive from Norway to Dakota, and German, and Czech, and a language you can't place. A man beside you buying nails turns out to be from a valley 2 fjords north of yours. You talk for 20 minutes in the doorway hungrily about nothing, the price of oxen, the hail, the heat, and it is one of the finest conversations of your life, and you never see him again. And 30 years on you will still occasionally wonder what became of him. You spend the night camped at the edge of town to spare the oxen, and in the long evening you allow yourself the saloon. 1 beer, 5 cents, and you make it last an hour and a half. The saloon is the frontier's parliament. Freighters, railroad men, a claim locator, 2 soldiers, a buffalo hunter with hands so scarred they look gloved. Talk moves down the bar like weather. Indian country to the west, the treaty lines, the Black Hills, the buffalo herds thinning, the market for wheat in Chicago, who has proved up, who has given up, whose claim by the county line is standing empty since March with the door swinging, and the claim locator, a quick-eyed man who makes his living guiding greenhorns to good quarter sections for a fee, gives you a piece of frontier wisdom, unasked, with your 1 beer as the price of admission. He tells you the difference, and he holds up 2 fingers to count it, between the men who last out here and the men who don't. It isn't strength, he says. He has seen blacksmiths quit and schoolteachers stay. It isn't money. Money runs out the same speed for everyone. It's whether a man can be nobody for 5 years, he says. Out there, nobody sees you, nobody claps for you, nobody knows your name. Some men starve on that quicker than on cornmeal. The ones who stay are the ones who can work 5 years for an audience of grass. He drains his glass and taps the bar twice. An audience of grass, son. Decide tonight if you can play to it. You ride home the next day with 1,100 pounds of flour, pork, salt and lumber scraps, doing the locator's arithmetic the whole 14 miles. And the truth is, you don't know. You are 19. You have been nobody for 52 days. 5 years sounds like the sentence of a court. But the wagon rolls north, and the town sinks back into the shimmer behind you, and the grass closes around the trail, and somewhere in the 10th mile you notice that your chest, which tightened all yesterday among the buildings and the voices, has gone loose again. That the silence pouring in over the wagon feels less like absence than like the lid coming off a jar. And you file that away without fully understanding it. The first small evidence, week 7, that the prairie has begun quietly, without asking your permission, to rebuild you into someone who belongs to it. July arrives like a lid coming down on a pot. The heat out here is not the heat you knew. There is no shade. Understand that literally. From your door, the nearest shade that isn't cast by your own body is the cottonwood grove at the creek, 2 miles off. The sun owns everything. By 10 in the morning, the air above the grass wobbles like water, and the horizon detaches itself and floats, and you see lakes shimmering in the distance that are not there. Mirage. The old-timers call it the prairie's joke. Men have died walking toward that water. You work anyway, because July is haying month, and hay is winter written in advance. Every armload you cut now is a day your oxen live in January. You swing the scythe from first light until the heat forces you into the dugout at midday, and the dugout, bless its dirt walls, holds cool like a spring house, the one gift of living in a hole. You lie on the grass mattress in that earth-smelling dark with your forearms twitching from the scythe, listening to the grasshoppers outside, a sound like the whole prairie frying in a pan, and you drip and you doze, and at 4 you go back out and cut until the light dies at 9. The scythe teaches your body a new language. There is a way to swing it that comes from the hips, a flat mowing arc where the blade hisses through the grass stems. That sound, that particular ripping whisper, shick, shick, shick. And the grass lies down in a neat swath to your left, and when you find the rhythm you can hold it for an hour, your mind going empty and white, nothing existing but the arc and the hiss and the sweat crawling down your spine. And there is a way to swing it wrong from the shoulders, and that way tears the muscles along your ribs and buries the blade point in a hidden hummock and folds the edge. And then you spend an evening with the whetstone drawing it along the steel, ting, 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 the sound carrying out over the darkening grass like a small sad bell. You drink from the barrel you fill at the creek, hauling water 2 miles because you have not yet found it under your own land. The water is warm and tastes of wood and algae. You strain it through cloth and drink it anyway. In August you will finally dig your well, 26 feet down through clay, working alone in a shaft barely wider than your shoulders, hauling the bucket of spoil up with a windlass, climbing down again, And every single time you climb down, you think about the fact that men die in these wells. The walls slump. The air goes bad at the bottom of some holes. They call it damp and it kills without smell or warning. And the settler's trick is to lower a candle first. If the flame dies, you don't go down. You lower the candle every time. Your hands shake a little every time. At 26 feet, the clay turns dark and then wet, and then water is seeping around your boots. Cold, actual cold water, rising over your ankles, and you stand in the bottom of that hole you dug with your own hands, and you laugh out loud. One bark of laughter straight up at the little coin of sky, and the well answers with your own echo. Water on your own land. You're ridiculously, disproportionately proud. You drink the first bucket slowly, like communion. It tastes of clay and iron, and it is the finest thing you have ever drunk. There is another July errand that must be told, because it owns 2 full days of your life and a strip of skin off your shoulder, and that is the wood trip. You have no trees. Say it again, because a Norwegian cannot truly believe it the first 100 times. You own 160 acres and not one single tree. Everything wooden in your life, the roof poles over your head, the stable frame, the well curb, the handles of every tool you own, came from somewhere else, and the somewhere else is the creek, 2 miles north, where the cottonwoods and box elders and willows grow in a green snake of shade along the water, and where every settler in the township goes for wood, and where, therefore, the wood is going. The big trees near the fords are already stumps. You walk the bank for an hour before you find what you need. Deadfall, mostly, seasoned box elder, and one leaning cottonwood the spring flood undercut. And then the work begins, and the work is this: axe, saw, sweat, and the flies. The flies deserve their own paragraph, and the settlers' letters give them one, every single letter, all summer, every summer. In the shade by the water, the mosquitoes hang in visible grey columns, and the moment you stop moving, they descend on your neck, your wrists, your eyelids, the backs of your ears, and the deer flies are worse. They bite through shirt cloth, a hot needle stab that makes you slap and curse in 2 languages, and you work with a smudge fire of green leaves smoking beside you, standing in the choking sweet smoke on purpose, trading breath for blood, because that is the only bargain the flies offer. By afternoon your neck is a ridge of welts, and your ears ring with wine. The saw is a 1-man crosscut, and a 1-man crosscut through a 14-inch cottonwood trunk is a conversation with despair. Jaka, jaka, jaka. The blade binds. You drive a wedge. It binds again. Sawdust sticks to the sweat on your forearms in a yellow crust. The trunk lets go at last with a tearing crack and a whoomp you feel through your boot soles, and then it must be limbed and bucked to lengths and dragged. This is where the shoulder pays, snaked out of the brush with a chain to where the wagon can stand, and lifted, log by log, your knees cracking, the bark grinding the raw places on your palms, until the wagon groans and the oxen turn their heads to look at what you expect of them. 2 days, for 1 load of wood. You'll make 3 such trips before the snow. And on the slow, creaking haul, home from the first one, in the long evening light, you compose in your head the letter you will finally write that night. The first real letter home since you landed on the claim. Because letters cost, paper costs, postage costs 12 cents to Norway, and a letter must therefore be worth its freight. You write it after dark at the table by the kerosene lamp dipping the pen. your ruined hand making the careful old country script it was taught, and you discover the thing every emigrant discovers with the pen in his hand. You cannot tell them the truth, and you cannot lie to them, and so you do what all the letters in all the archives do. You walk the line. You write that the land is rich beyond anything in the valley, and it is true. You write that you have your own well and 10 acres broken, and it is true. You write that the work is heavy, but you are well, and it is almost true. You do not write about the wind at night, or the talking to oxen, or the man-shaped hollow of a loneliness you carry around your own table. You send them the country's promise and keep its price to yourself, and in this you are identical to 100,000 other people, bent over lamp-lit tables across this frontier tonight, writing home in Norwegian and German and Czech and Swedish, all of them walking the same line. And it is from these letters, read aloud in stone farmhouses to whole gathered villages, that the next shipload will decide to come. Your own letter, though you cannot know it, will be carried to church in your mother's apron pocket and read 11 times, and your cousin Lars, 17, will hear it with his jaw set, and in 3 years he will be sleeping on your floor. But July is also when you learn what František meant about the sky. It comes on a Sunday afternoon from the northwest, and it does not look dangerous at first. A cloud bank, blue-black at the base, tall and white and beautiful at the top. A cathedral of cloud. You stand watching it, pleased. Rain for the corn. Then you notice the colour under it turning green. An ugly green, like a bruise, like bad meat. And you notice the wind has died completely, utterly. The first true silence you've ever heard on this prairie, the grass standing motionless, the grasshoppers stopped, the whole world holding its breath. And then you hear it, a sound like a train, except there is no railroad within 14 miles, a roar, growing, hail. You get the oxen loose and drive them into the lee of the rise, and you get yourself into the dugout, and then the world outside turns white and tries to beat itself to death. Hailstones the size of hens' eggs, some the size of your fist, hammering the sod roof above your head, thudding into the ground like thrown stones, and the noise is not like weather, it is like violence, like a mob on the roof, and it goes on for 11 minutes. And 11 minutes is a very long time when you're crouched in a hole in the ground, with your arms over your head listening to your year being destroyed. When you come out, the prairie is white and steaming. Ice in July, melting in the grass. The air smells sharp and washed and cold. And your 10 acres of sod corn, your chopped, dropped, stamped, aching back 10 acres, is shredded. Not flattened, shredded. The stalks stand in ragged sticks, leaves beaten into green pulp on the ground. You stand at the edge of the field for a long time. There is no one to say anything to, so you don't say anything. Here is what the prairie teaches you that evening, and it is a lesson no schoolmaster in Norway could have set. The hail fell in a strip. Storms here run in narrow paths, sometimes only half a mile wide. Your corn is destroyed. The Novaks, 4 miles east, is untouched. If your claim had sat 1 mile further south, nothing. 1 mile north, nothing. There is no reason to it, no justice, no punishment, no meaning. František said it, and now you know it in your body. The prairie does not know you are here. The corn partly recovers, maimed, half height, but corn is stubborn, and by September you will still pull a thin crop off it, nubbins and half-filled ears, ox feed, not man feed. But something in you does not recover, or rather something in you is replaced. The boy who stood in May believing that work is repaid, that boy is gone. In his place is someone who watches the northwest sky every single hour of every single day, the way a sailor watches the sea. You will do this for the rest of your life. Decades from now, sitting on a porch in a town, an old man, you will still stop mid-sentence when a cloud bank builds in the northwest, and your grandchildren will wonder why. August grinds past in heat and haying. You stack the hay in long ricks near the dugout and learn from Frantisek to rope and weight the top so the wind cannot unbuild in one night what took you a month. You dig a cellar hole for potatoes and turnips grown in the little garden patch you planted first thing. The garden the hail somehow half spared, because the hail spares what it spares. You shoot prairie chickens which practically walk into the pot, and once at 400 yards you watch a line of antelope cross your land like a ripple of tan silk. Too far, too fast, gone. And some evenings, when the work loosens its grip for an hour, you sit on the roof of your own dugout. You sit on your house, this country is absurd, and you watch the sun go down, and I want you to see this, because the men and women who lived it wrote it down again and again in their letters home, as if they couldn't stop trying to describe it. A prairie sunset in dry August air is not a sunset. It is a slow explosion. The whole western sky ignites, crimson, then copper, then rose, then a green-gold band lying on the horizon like a lit fuse, and the grass catches the colour, and the entire earth turns red gold and moves in the wind, a million acres of moving light, and above the east the first stars come out while the west is still burning, and you sit on your dirt roof with your ruined hands hanging over your knees, 19 years old, 4,000 miles from everyone who has ever loved you, and you feel two things at once, so hard that they hurt. This place is trying to kill me, and I have never seen anything so beautiful in my life. Both things are true. They will stay true for 40 years. That is the whole deal the prairie offers, and no one gets a different one. There is one day in that first summer when the loneliness lifts entirely, and it is the 4th of July, and you nearly miss it, because no one thought to tell the Norwegian that America has a birthday. Frantisek's middle boy runs the 4 miles, runs it barefoot for the joy of running, to fetch you on the morning of the 3rd, panting out the news in a tumble of Czech and English. Tomorrow everyone, the Grove, come. The Grove is the big cottonwood stand on the creek 6 miles southeast. The only real trees in the township, and everyone turns out to mean something you had stopped believing existed. 40, maybe 50 human beings gathered in one place, out of a country you had thought held 5. They come in wagons out of the grass from every direction, materializing off the horizon one by one all through the morning. Norwegians from the claims to the north you never knew were there, a Swedish family, Germans, 2 Irish brothers, a Yankee schoolteacher and her father, the Bohemians in force. The wagons park in a great ragged ring in the cottonwood shade, the horses and oxen picketed along the creek, and the grass between fills up with the impossible sight of tablecloths. Tablecloths on the prairie, spread on the ground and weighted with stones, and on them everything that 50 scraping, saving, salt pork households can produce when they decide once a year to be extravagant. Fried prairie chicken, cold roast venison, new potatoes in cream, wild plum preserves, cornbread, rye bread, a white cake, someone hauled eggs and sugar 6 miles in a jolting wagon for that cake, and coffee boiled in a wash boiler over a fire, enough coffee for a regiment. You understand perhaps 1 word in 5 of the speeches. A Yankee homesteader with a beard like a prophet reads the Declaration of Independence off a printed sheet, loud, against the wind, and the crowd stands in the grass with their hats off, and you stand with them, hat off, catch in pieces, liberty, happiness, dissolve, right of the people. And next to you old Bergstrom from the North claims, 20 years in America, murmurs a running Norwegian translation, and you listen to the words that made the country whose grass you're betting your life on, and something about hearing it there, in the open, in two languages at once, under that enormous sky, puts a hook in you that never comes out. Decades later you will stand at township meetings and county conventions, a citizen, a voter, once briefly a school board president, and it starts here, at the edge of a tablecloth, hat in your hands. The afternoon is races and horseshoes and gossip and trading. You win the young men's foot race to the creek and back. 11 months of walking behind a plough has put something into your legs that the town-bred boys don't have, and win a pocket knife for it, and are pounded on the back by strangers, and the school teacher smiles at you in a way you will think about against your will for several weeks of solitary haying. There are fireworks at dusk, 8 Roman candles, hoarded and freighted and worth their weight in silver, fired one at a time over the creek to a chorus of screaming children, each burning ball of colour doubling itself in the dark water, and then singing around the fire, every nation taking a turn, songs nobody else understands and everybody hums anyway. You drive home by moonlight, 2.5 miles an hour, the oxen finding the way, and you can hear the singing behind you for the first mile thinning, and then the frogs and the wind take over, and the loneliness comes back down over the land like a tide coming in. But it comes down differently now, because now you know. Scattered out there in the dark, one to a horizon, are 40 people who will gather again, at threshing, at Christmas, at a funeral, at a barn raising, and between gatherings, every one of them is doing what you are doing, holding a quarter section alone against the wind, waiting for the next tablecloth. That is what a community is out here. Not a place, a promise, stretched thin across 30 miles of grass and holding. In late August, the prairie shows you one more way it can kill a man, and this one comes from the inside. It starts as a chill on a 90-degree afternoon. You are stacking hay, sweat running into your eyes, and suddenly you are cold, absurdly, impossibly cold, your teeth chattering in the furnace heat, gooseflesh standing on your soaked arms, and you know, because everyone on this frontier knows, because it is discussed at every store counter and every church supper from Texas to Manitoba, exactly what has found you. Ague, fever and ague, the shakes, the settler's sickness, the tax the sloughs collect. Nobody in 1870 knows about the mosquitoes yet. They blame the night air, the turned sod, the miasma off the wet ground, and they are wrong about the cause and dead right about the season and the places, and every low wet claim pays it. It runs in cycles, and the cycles own you. First the chill, an hour, 2 hours, shaking so hard the bed frame knocks the wall, piling on every blanket and both coats and shaking still, your spine a rod of ice. Then the turn and the fever, burning, throwing off everything you piled on, the dugout ceiling swimming, sweat soaking the grass mattress through, dreams walking around in daylight. You hold one full conversation with your mother, in Norwegian, quite calmly, before noticing she is 4,000 miles away and the person in the doorway is a hung coat. Then the sweat breaks, and it pours off you, and the fever burns out, and you lie there wrung empty as a twisted rag, weak as string. And then, this is the cruelty of it, a day of feeling almost well. And then it comes again, every second day, like a debt. Well day, shaking day, well day, shaking day. And the work does not stop. That is the sentence inside the sentence. The oxen must be watered on the shaking days. The hay must come in on the well days, and you cut and stack in a grey haze, resting on the fork handle, doing in a day what July you did by noon. There is medicine, quinine, real medicine, one of the few true medicines that age owns, and the store carries it, and it works, and it costs by the ounce more than any single thing you buy this year, and you pay it, counting out the coins with a hand that isn't steady, because the storekeeper tells you flatly what everyone knows. These shakes untreated can ride a man every other day from August till frost, and men have lost whole harvests to it, and harvests lost in September are lives lost in March, at one remove, where nobody has to call it that. The quinine is bitterness itself, bitterness as a pure idea, dissolved in water, a taste that makes your whole skull clench. And you drink it down morning after morning, and the cycles stretch and stumble, and by the first cool nights of September they let you go. They will come back at you milder next August and the August after. The ague is a tenant, not a visitor, all across this frontier, until the sloughs are drained decades from now, and the sickness quietly disappears and nobody ever quite knows why. What it leaves you, besides the memory of that bitterness, is a new item on the list of things you watch, along with the northwest sky, the hayricks, the level in the flour barrel, a new entry in the private ledger every settler keeps and none of them names, the ledger of everything, at all times, that is quietly trying to take this away from you. The list is long. You keep the ledger anyway. That is the whole of it, really. That is homesteading, in one sentence. Keeping the ledger and staying. September, and the grass begins to die. September is also the month of meat, and the month of meat begins with the sky filling up. The flights come down out of the north in waves. Ducks first, then geese, then the sand-hill cranes passing high over with that rolling, purring, prehistoric call that carries 5 miles and makes the hair stand on your arms the first time you hear it. The sloughs on and around your claim, which all summer held a few teal and a heron, are suddenly rafted black with birds, thousands of them, rising at a gunshot in a roar of wings like a breaking wave and wheeling and settling again a 1/4 mile on. And you have a rifle, and powder is money, and every bird brought down is a meal that costs nothing but the shot. And so September evenings find you belly down in the slough grass at the water's edge, motionless, mud soaking cold through your shirt front, mosquitoes singing at your ears, waiting for the ducks to swim their unhurried circles into line, because a man who must count his cartridges learns to wait for 2 birds in a row, 3 if God is kind. The flat crack of the shot, the wing roar, the retrieve wading to your thighs in water, already carrying the first knife edge of autumn cold. You pluck and clean by lamplight, feathers sticking to your wet fingers, saving every feather in a sack because feathers are a pillow, feathers are a tick bed, feathers, enough of them, are cash at the store. And then the preserving, which is its own long education. Meat in September must somehow become meat in February, and there is no ice house, no tin can, no cold cellar deep enough to be trusted before the true freeze. So you do what the country does. You salt the pork from town and the plainer duck meat down in the brine barrel layer on layer, your arms in the stinging salt to the elbow, the cuts on your knuckles announcing themselves one by one. You dry strips of venison, frantisek, and you jump 3 deer in the creek brush in late September and take one half to each household, hung in ribbons over slow smoke, turned and turned again, until they are hard and black-red and will keep till Judgment Day. And when the hard freeze finally locks the country in November, the simplest larder of all opens, the outside. Whole geese, gutted and frozen like stones, hanging in a sack under the stable eave, a haunch buried in the hay of the rick, colder there than any spring house in Norway. You are laying food around yourself the way you laid sod, course on course, wall against the same enemy. The garden comes in the same weeks, potatoes forked out of the black ground in the cool September mornings, and this, after the hail and the maimed corn, is the year's one unqualified triumph, because the potatoes did not fail. The potatoes made 26 bushels off the little patch, fat and clean, and you kneel in the dirt picking them out of the forked-up earth, with cold stiff fingers and mounting joy, because 26 bushels of potatoes is arithmetic. Even the Prairie cannot argue with, a man can live on potatoes. Men have, whole nations have. Turnips and rutabagas after them, cabbages last, and all of it goes down into the cellar hole under the dugout floor, into sand and straw, layer on layer, and by October, when you lift the plank and hold the lamp down into that hole and look at what is stored there, the barrels, the crocks, the sand-banked roots, the hanging dark ribbons of meat, you feel a settledness in your chest that no coin ever gave you. The frontier teaches a wealth older than money, wealth you can hold a lamp over, not sadly, gloriously. The green drains out of the world week by week and is replaced by gold, then bronze, then a pale tawny brown, 160 acres of standing cured hay in every direction, and beyond your lines 1,000,000 more, unbroken to the horizons. The wind moves through the dry grass with the new sound now. Not the soft summer hiss, but a harder rattle, a papery seething like the whole world whispering through dry lips. You should find it beautiful, and part of you does. The other part of you has done the arithmetic that every settler on this frontier does in September, lying awake in the dark, dry grass, horizon to horizon, no breaks, no rivers wide enough to matter for miles, wind that runs 30, 40 miles an hour for days at a stretch. The Prairie in autumn is not a landscape, it is a fuse. Everyone knows it. In town, you make the 14-mile trip in late September, your first trip since June, hauling your pitiful nubbin corn and 3 sacks of potatoes to trade against flour, salt pork, coffee, kerosene, and cartridges. In town, the talk at the store counter is fire, where it burned last fall. Who lost what? The Swedish family north of the tracks who lost their stacks, their stable, and their team, and boarded the eastbound in October with everything they still owned in 2 carpet bags. 5 years of work converted into 2 carpet bags and a stunned silence. The storekeeper weighs your coffee and gives you the second lesson of the country without being asked, because out here men hand each other survival the way they'd hand over a rope. Plow your guards, boy, fire guards. 2 sets of furrows around everything you love. House, stacks, stable, a broad ploughed ring of bare black earth, and between the 2 rings burn the grass yourself on a still evening carefully, so that when the wildfire comes it finds nothing to eat around your buildings. When? He says when, not if. So you spend the first week of October ploughing circles. It feels absurd, ploughing land you don't intend to plant, walking bright and duke around and around your dugout and your precious hay ricks like a man drawing a magic ring against the devil. 6 furrows out, a burned strip, 6 furrows in. František walks over, 4 miles, he walks it like a stroll to the gate, inspects your guards, kicks the ploughed earth with his boot, widens 2 places with a wave of his hand, and helps you backburn the middle strip on a dead calm evening, the 2 of you moving along the flame line with wet grain sacks, killing every creeping finger of fire that tries to cross the furrows, working in the smell of smoke and scorched earth until midnight. He leaves you with 1 more sentence, holding up 1 finger. Fire come, you no fight, you go in ground. Grass fire fast, but fast finish. Only fast finish if nothing to eat. 10 days later, in the middle of the afternoon, you smell burnt bread. You're mucking the little sod stable when it comes to you. Faint on a hard northwest wind that has been blowing since dawn. That smell, sweet scorched, wrong. You step outside and look northwest. The way you've looked northwest every day since July, and there it is, a low brown smudge lying on the horizon, like a dirty thumbprint on the sky. It could be 20 miles away. As you stand there it thickens and spreads, and the base of it turns from brown to a boiling grey white. And beneath the grey, so faint you might be imagining it, a flicker of orange, like a coal breathed on. 20 miles, and the wind is coming from it to you, and the wind is running maybe 35 miles an hour. Do the arithmetic. Everyone out here can do this arithmetic. A headfire in cured grass driven by that wind moves faster than a horse can gallop, and holds the pace long after any horse would drop. You have, at the outside, half an hour, probably less. What happens inside your body in the next second is worth noticing, because it is 10,000 years old. Your mouth goes dry, instantly, as if a valve closed. Your hearing sharpens until you can hear your own pulse. Time goes strange, thick and slow and terribly clear, and your legs are already moving before you have decided anything. The oxen are everything. Without the team, you are finished even if you live. You get Bright and Duke out of the stable, and they already know, that's the thing. Their heads are up, and their eyes are ringed white, and Duke is pulling against the halter hard enough to lift you off your feet, because their noses found the smoke before yours did, and 100 generations of their blood is screaming one word. You cannot fight 1,100 pounds of terrified ox. You don't try. You drag them, hauling on the lead with your whole body weight, boots ploughing the dirt into the middle of the burned and ploughed ring, and you tie them short to the post there, so short their noses nearly touch it, because a long-tied, panicked animal will break its own neck. The chickens. You grab the crate, throw it down the dugout steps, hear it land badly, no time. Water. You drop the bucket down the well, haul it up, arms burning, soak 2 grain sacks and the old blanket, drape the wet blanket over your shoulders, haul another bucket, pour it across the canvas door. Another. Your hands are shaken so hard the bucket rim chatters against the well curb, and now you look up, and the horizon has changed. The smudge is a wall. It stands maybe 3 miles off, and it is not a line of flame, not from here. It is a mountain range of smoke, tan and black and boiling, leaning toward you, its top shredding forward in the wind, and beneath it runs a seam of light, orange-white, flickering, and you can hear it. That is the thing the letters and the memoirs all agree on. The thing they say no one believes until they hear it. A prairie head fire roars. a deep freight train waterfall roar felt in the chest before the ears, punctuated by a sound like musket volleys. The air inside the grass stems superheating and exploding. Millions of stems, a crackling so dense it becomes a single tearing snarl. Ahead of the fire the world is running. Jackrabbits paw past your ring, a dozen, 2 dozen, ears flat, not swerving around you past your boots, gone. A coyote lopes through your yard without a glance at the chickens, at you, at anything. It runs alongside 3 antelope, predator and prey shoulder to shoulder, an armistice of pure terror. Prairie chickens hurtle overhead downwind. A rattlesnake flows across the ploughed guard like poured oil. Everything alive on this prairie is moving in one direction, and you're standing still, and every animal instinct you own is shrieking at you to run with them. Frantisec's finger. Fire come, you know fight. You go in ground. The smoke arrives before the fire, it always does. A rolling twilight that swallows the sun and turns it into a dull red coin, and then swallows the coin too. The temperature of the wind climbs. It is like standing at an open stove door, then like standing inside the stove. Ash begins to fall around you, grey flakes gently, obscenely gentle, like snow. Burning fragments sail overhead, whole clumps of lit grass, thrown a 1/4 mile ahead of the fire line by the wind. And this is how fires jump rivers, jump roads, jump guards, and one of them lands inside your ring, in the grass by the stable, and blooms, and you are on it with the wet sack, beating it. Whap, 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 spark, stinging your face, and it dies. And another lands, and you kill that one, and you can no longer see 30 feet, and your eyes are streaming, and each breath tastes of hot metal and scorches faintly at the top of your lungs, and the roar is no longer in the distance. The roar is the whole world, and through the smoke to the northwest you can see it now. The actual fire, a wall of flame standing taller than a house, taller than any building you have seen in America, leaning, galloping, wide as the whole horizon. You do the last thing. You always meant to do it, and now your body almost refuses. You untie your mind from the oxen. They are tied in the middle of bare burned ground. The fire should split around them. Should. And you go down the dugout steps, and you pull the soaked canvas tight across the door, and you lie down on the floor of your hole in the ground, in the dark, with the wet blanket over your head, your face pressed into the cold dirt floor because the lowest air is the last good air. And the fire goes over you. It takes less than 2 minutes. It is the longest thing that has ever happened to you. The roar rises until it is not a sound but a pressure, a hand squeezing the whole dugout. The light through the canvas turns orange, then white-orange, then dark. The heat comes through 2 feet of earth roof as a slow, terrible warmth on your back, like an iron held close. You hear the oxen scream. Oxen can scream. You learn that today. And something outside cracks and cracks again like gunfire, and the smoke finds its way in around the canvas and crawls along the floor to you, and you breathe through the wet blanket wool. In, out, in, out. And you hear your own voice, muffled, and realize you're speaking Norwegian, the table prayer of your childhood, over and over, not from faith exactly, but because it is the oldest sentence you own. Then the roar is past, moving away, south and east, toward the horizon, toward whoever lives there. Fast finish, Frantisek said. Only fast finish if nothing to eat. You count to 100. You do it twice. Then you push back the canvas and climb the steps and stand up into the world that is left. It is black, all of it. Horizon to horizon in every direction, the prairie is gone and a black, smoking, glowing plain has been put down in its place. Ash-black ground, threads of smoke rising from 10,000 points, dull orange worms of fire still crawling along the thicker grass clumps, the sun a bloody smear in a brown sky. The silence is enormous. The fire took the wind's voice with it. There is no grass left to hiss. Your hayricks stand untouched inside their black ring, the guards held. The stable smokes but stands. The doorpost is charred where a flying brand lodged. That was the gunfire crack, and burned itself out against the sod. And in the middle of the ring, Brighton Duke stand trembling. Alive, ash-grey, singed along the spine, eyes rimmed red, and when you put your hand on Duke's neck, he flinches and then leans. 1,100 pounds of ox leaning into a 19-year-old, and you stand there in the smoking dark, holding an ox's head against your chest, and your legs are suddenly water, and you sit down right there in the ash. You are alive. Everything you own is alive or standing. Because two Bohemians 4 miles east threw you a rope, and because you ploughed circles like a madman for a week, and because you went in the ground. The fire runs southeast until it hits the river breaks near the settlement and dies in the night. Later you hear what it took, tallied at the store counter in the flat voices men use for these things. Stacks, stables, a school section, fences, 1 team of horses, and a hired man on the Anderson place who saw the smoke and ran for the creek instead of the ploughed ground, and was fast, they said, very fast. But the fire was faster, and they found him 100 yards short of the water. He'd been in the country 5 weeks. Nobody could remember his first name. The grass grows over everything here. František told you that on the first day, and you thought it was a figure of speech. 2 weeks after the fire, the neighbourhood does what the neighbourhood does after every disaster on this frontier, which is the thing that keeps the frontier alive at all. It gathers at the wound. The Hendersons south of the burn line lost their stacks and their stable. The family safe, the stock safe. But a winter's hay gone in 20 minutes, and no roof over the animals with the snow 6 weeks out. And so, on a grey Saturday, wagons come out to the grass again the way they came to the grove in July, only this time loaded with tools and lumber scraps, and from every household that has any to spare, hay. You bring a load yourself, a real subtraction, a load you will feel in March. And you never for one moment consider not bringing it, and that is the fire's last lesson. Out here, generosity is not a virtue, it is infrastructure. The hay you give the Hendersons in October is the hay someone will give you the year your turn comes, and everyone's turn comes. 14 men raise a sod stable in a day. You have never seen it done at speed, by men who know the work, and it is worth seeing. 2 breaking ploughs running side by side in the unburned slough grass, turning out ribbons of sod that other men slice into blocks with spades. Chook, 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 and wagons shuttling the blocks, and 2 crews laying walls from opposite corners, grass side down, joints staggered like brickwork, walls rising an inch with every course, and the whole thing done to a running fire of jokes in 4 languages that nobody fully understands and everybody laughs at. The women feed the crew twice from wash boiler and Dutch oven. By dusk there is a building where there was ash, rafters up, hay going into the loft, and Henderson stands in front of it trying to make a speech of thanks, and managing 4 words before his voice goes, and nobody minds, because nobody came for the speech. You drive home in the dark with an empty wagon and aching shoulders, and something in your chest that has no Norwegian name and no English one either. The specific warmth of having been one of 14 men who beat the winter to a stable. It is the exact opposite of the audience of grass. You think about the claim locator in the saloon, his 2 fingers, his verdict. He was half right. A man out here must be able to be nobody for 5 years. But only 5 days at a time. By next June, where that man fell, the prairie will be green and waist-high and moving in the wind, and there will be no mark at all. For 2 weeks after the fire you live on a black planet. Every step outside puffs ash to your knees. It gets into everything. Your food, your water, your bed, the creases of your neck, the corners of your eyes. The oxen come in from grazing with black legs and black muzzles because there is nothing to graze. You start feeding hay in October, a month early, and every forkful you throw down is a forkful subtracted from February. And you feel that subtraction in your stomach like a debt collector's knock. When it finally rains, the whole black world turns to grey paste and the smell of 100,000 acres of wet char sits over the land for days. Bitter, ancient, like the inside of a cold chimney. But here is the prairie's strangest mercy, and you would not believe it if you didn't watch it happen. Within 3 weeks, on the warm days of that October, the burned ground hazes green. New grass, sprouting through the ash, because the fire that killed everything above the soil never touched the root mat below it, and the ash itself is food, and the prairie has been burning and returning like this for 10,000 years, long before you, indifferent to you, and it will do it long after. You stand at your door one mild morning and look at that impossible green mist lying over the black, and you understand that you survived something that, to the land itself, was not a catastrophe at all. It was housekeeping. Then the green stops, because the frost comes, and then the frost stops mattering, because the snow comes, and now, finally, you meet the season this whole year has been aimed at. A Dakota winter does not arrive. It attacks. The first blizzard comes in the second week of November, and you deserve to live through it minute by minute, because nothing else will make you understand. The day before it is warm. That is the trap, and it is always the trap. A soft, mild, blue November day. So gentle you work outside in shirt sleeves, banking sod against the stable's north wall, and you think, everyone thinks, every greenhorn on this frontier thinks it once, that the stories were exaggerated. That night the wind swings into the northwest and begins to climb, and by morning it is carrying snow, and by noon the snow has stopped falling from the sky at all, because none of it is coming from the sky anymore. It's coming off the ground, off 100 miles of open country upwind, ground to powder and hurled horizontally, and the world outside your door simply ends. Not darkens, ends. You crack the canvas an inch and look into a white that has no depth, no shapes, no up, no down. A moving, screaming white, the light of which comes from nowhere and everywhere, and the stable, 50 feet away, does not exist. The rope exists. You put on everything you own, both shirts, the coat, the muffler, wrapped twice over your face until only your eyes are bare, mittens over gloves, and you take the rope in both hands and go, and the storm hits you the way a river hits a wading man. The wind is not gusting. It is a solid, lean, 50 miles an hour without pause, and it drives the snowflower through every seam of your clothing in the first 10 steps, ice sifting down your neck, up your sleeves, and the bare strip of skin around your eyes burns as if held to a stove, and the sound is not howling. That word is too musical. It is a flat, enormous mechanical roar, a mill grinding the world, hand over hand, 50 feet. When the stable wall bumps out of the white against your shoulder, you are as grateful to it as to a human being. Inside, in the sudden brown dark and the animal warmth, the oxen turn their heads to you and the roar drops to a deep buffeting drone, and you do the chores with numb hands by feel. Hay down, ice chopped from the barrel, chunk, 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 and you stand a minute in the warm smell of ox and hay, gathering yourself for the trip back, and it strikes you with complete clarity that everything you have and everything you are is currently attached to the world by 1 inch of hemp rope, and that you tied both ends of it yourself in October on a warm afternoon, whistling. The blizzard blows for 2 days and the better part of a third. You keep the stove going and the hay twisting, and you learn the sound vocabulary of it. The deep, steady roar of the wind proper, the sand hiss of snow against the door, the sudden shuddering whumps when a gust drops down the stovepipe, and the fire gasps and breathes smoke into the room. The pistol crack of the frozen sod settling in the small hours. On the second night, the drift over the door grows so deep that the wind sound goes strange and pillowed, and when the storm finally dies on the third morning, you have to dig upward to leave your own house, pushing the door canvas against packed snow and burrowing out like an animal, and you emerge blinking into a world so still, so blue-white, so blazing with sun that it seems less like weather has passed than like the earth has been replaced overnight. Drifts stand carved and knife-edged like white dunes, 10 feet deep in the hollows, and the level ground is swept nearly bare, scoured down to frozen grass. The wind does not distribute snow out here, it sculpts with it, and the silence rings, and the cold in that stillness is deeper than anything in the storm, an assassin's cold, 30 below and windless, air like inhaled glass. That is one blizzard. There will be 5 more before April. You will learn their approach by heart. The soft grey wall in the northwest, the halt and swing of the wind, the strange yellow light, the way the oxen bunch and turn their tails before your own senses catch anything at all. And you will never once, all winter, all your life, walk that rope without both hands on it. And between the blizzards, in the long iron stillness of deep January, come the wolves. You hear them before you ever see them, and hearing them is worse. It begins on a windless night of terrible cold, the kind of night when the snow itself creaks and the stars burn without twinkling, and you are half asleep when the first howl rises somewhere off to the northwest, long, wavering, unbearably lonely, a sound that goes into a human body along channels 10,000 years old and turns key there. Then an answer from the east, then a third voice, and the voices braid together and slide and break apart, and the oxen begin to move in the stable. You can hear them through the wall. The heavy shifting, a low blowing snort, and Duke hits the wall once with his hip. Boom, and you lie in your hole in the ground with the fire dying and your rifle standing in the corner and your heart going like a fist on a door. By day you find the stories written in the snow, and the snow hides nothing. The tracks come in from the northwest, big, dog-like but not dog, the stride too long, too straight, too purposeful, and they circle the stable, twice around. At the door they stop and mill, the snow packed and printed over itself, and there is a mark low on the door planks where something stood and scratched, and you crouch there in the blue morning cold reading it like scripture, the breath smoking out of you, and you understand with your whole skin what the stable is. A wooden box with everything you own inside it, standing in the dark, all night, every night in a country where hungry things run in company. What follows is a week of war, and it is a war of nerves, not blood. You take to banking the stable door with a drift of packed snow each night and setting it with slop water that freezes into armour. You save every scrap of anything that burns bright and keep a torch of hay and tar paper ready. Twice you stand out in the killing cold at midnight and fire the rifle at shapes at the edge of the starlight. Shapes that flow, that are gone before the crack stops echoing, and you cannot say for certain you saw anything at all, and that is the special cruelty of wolves in the dark. They recruit your imagination and make it work for them. František, consulted, is unimpressed in the way that only a man in his 7th winter can afford. Wolves want the easy meal, he says, the deer yarded in the creek brush, the settler's unpenned pig carrion under the snow, a sound stable, a shut door, a man who shows a light. They move along. Wolf is not Blizzard, he says, holding up the teaching finger. Wolf can be argued with. He is right. The tracks thin, then stop. Later you hear the packers pull down a crippled steer 8 miles south and been poisoned over the carcass for the bounty, because that is the other thing happening on this frontier, the quiet extermination running ahead of the plow, strychnine and traps and the $2 bounty, and within your own lifetime the howling will stop across this whole country entirely, and there will come a winter night in your old age on the porch of the white frame house, when you realize you've not heard a wolf in 30 years, and you will discover to your own bewilderment that some perverse corner of you misses it, that the nights are safer and smaller. Nobody warns you that taming a country works in both directions, but that is far off. Here now, in January of your first winter, the wolves leave you one lasting gift. They cure you permanently of the notion that the winter is empty. The white world outside your door is inhabited, patrolled, read and written on nightly, and you are one of the things that lives in it. Larger than most, weaker than some, armed, alert, and exactly as native now as anything else that makes it to spring. The days shrink to a fist. Understand what the word blizzard means out here, because it does not mean snowfall. It means wind, 40, 50 miles an hour, driving snow ground fine as flour, a white smoke that does not fall but travels sideways, and inside it the world is erased, not dimmed, erased. Men in this decade will die between their house and their barn. That is not a story told to frighten children. It happens every winter, all across this frontier, which is why you do what František showed you in October, and what every settler learns or dies not learning. Before the snow flies, you stretch a rope from the dugout door to the stable door, waist high, tied fast at both ends. When the white smoke comes, you do not walk to your stable. You haul yourself along that rope hand over hand, 50 feet, eyes shut against the needles, and the rope is the only reason you believe a stable exists at all. Let go of it in the wrong 10 feet, and you can wander off your own claim and freeze within shouting distance of your own stove, and no one will hear the shouting because the wind eats it. The cold itself is a thing you must be taught. 20 below zero, 30 below, on the worst mornings colder, cold that makes the sod walls crack in the night with sounds like pistol shots, cold that turns the nails in the stable door white with frost an inch thick, cold that freezes the water bucket solid 3 feet from the stove, cold that grabs the wet inside of your nose the moment you step out and glues your nostrils with each breath. Tick, tick, a sensation you never once imagined in Norway, which you had believed foolishly was a cold country. You learn to check your face with your fingers when you're outside, pressing your cheeks, your nose, your chin, because frostbite doesn't hurt when it happens. That's its trick. The flesh just goes quiet, then white, then dead, and men lose ears and noses and fingers without ever feeling the moment of loss. You learn to watch for the warm sleepiness that's deep cold pours into a tired body, the drowsy voice that says sit down a moment in the snow, just a moment, because that voice is death itself talking, wearing your own accent. And you learn what fuel means when there are no trees. You burned your small woodpile by December. What you burn now is what the prairie gives, twisted hay. You sit by the stove for hours, taking hanks of slough hay and twisting them into hard, tight cables, doubling them, tucking the ends, your hands doing it 10,000 times until they do it without you, and each twist burns for a few minutes, so that feeding the fire is not a chore, it is an occupation, a rhythm that structures the whole day. Twist, feed, twist, feed. And when the hay runs short, you burn what half the frontier burns. Buffalo chips gathered in the fall and dried cow dung, and you long ago stopped finding that strange, because it burns hot and clean, and it is that or the cold, and the cold is not an opponent you negotiate with. The days shrink to a fist. But before they shrink all the way, there is Christmas. And Christmas on the prairie deserves to be told, because it is the strangest one of your life, and, in a way you can't explain in your letters home, one of the best. You spend the week before it in a fever of small industry. You have nothing to give and no one to give it to for 4 miles, and yet the habit of the season is in your blood too deep to ignore, so you make things. You carve a horse for the smallest Novak boy from a chunk of cottonwood, working by stovelight with your knife, shavings curling over your knuckles, the wood releasing its faint bitter green smell into the dugout. You braid a hackamore of scrap leather for the older boys. For Marie you have hoarded, since the September trip to town, unbelievably, a 1/4 pound of white sugar and 3 lemons. Lemons in Dakota in winter, sold off a delayed freight at the store, and you paid a shameful price and have regretted nothing. On the morning of the 24th, because Norwegians and Bohemians both keep the eve, and this is the first thing your two nations agree on, you walk the 4 miles east, under a sky like grey wool, the cold sitting at a merciful 10 above, the snow squeaking under your boots in that particular dry cold rhythm. Creak, 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 the only sound in the world. And the Novak house, when it rises out of the white, has a candle in the glass window at midday, and smoke standing straight up from the chimney. And when Marie opens the door, the smell that rolls out, roast goose. František shot 2 on the last flight south and hung them frozen in the stable. The smell of roasting goose and baking bread and hot fat and cinnamon, after weeks of your own salt pork and mush, is so overwhelming that you have to stand a moment on the doorstone, snow melting on your shoulders, just breathing it, while the children drag you in by both hands. The evening's a patch quilt of 2 countries, Marie's Czech braided bread and your description half in gesture of Norwegian lefse, which she vows to attempt. Carols in Czech, and then, because they demand it, one in Norwegian, your voice alone in the candlelight, rusty, off-key, the first time you've sung since the ship, and you get through it, barely, looking at the wall. František reads the Christmas story from a Czech Bible, tracing the line with a cracked forefinger, and you follow in your Norwegian one, The two texts side by side saying the same thing in different clothes, and the candle flames lean when the wind finds the door, and the children fall asleep in a heap like puppies, and the wooden horse is a triumph, clutched even in sleep. Late, over the last coffee, Marie says something in Czech and Frantisek turns it slowly into English for you, working at it, wanting it right. She says, at home in Bohemia, the village, the church, the bells, everyone together, and still some people alone in the middle of it. Here, everyone alone, 20 miles of alone, and yet tonight nobody is. She looks at you when he finishes to see if it arrived. It arrived. You sleep on their floor by the stove and walk home on Christmas morning across a world so still and white and blazing under new sun that it hurts to look at, carrying half a goose wrapped in a cloth, and your own dugout, when you climb down into its earth-smelling dark, feels for the first time not like a hole you're hiding in, but like a place you're returning to. That is the whole gift of that Christmas, and it cannot be put in a letter. Somewhere in this terrible year, without your noticing the moment, this claim stopped being where you are and became where you live. The days shrink to a fist, light at 8, dark at 4:30. In between, chores, haul yourself down the rope, water the oxen, chopping the ice skin off the stable barrel, chunk, 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 throw hay, muck, haul back, melt snow on the stove because the well rope freezes, cook, cornmeal mush, salt pork, potatoes from the cellar hole, beans, coffee that you stretch thinner every week, and then hours and hours of dark, alone, in a hole in the ground under the snow with the wind. Always, finally, the wind. And in the first week of February, the winter makes its most serious attempt on you, and it does not use cold or wolves or snow. It uses a tooth. It begins as an ache in the lower left jaw. A dull pulse you ignore for 2 days, because ignoring is the frontier's first medicine. On the 3rd day, the pulse becomes a drum beat, and on the 4th, the whole side of your face swells hot and tight and shining, and you cannot chew, and then you cannot sleep, and then you cannot think. And understand what this means in Dakota Territory in February of 1871. The nearest dentist is in Yankton, 60 miles. The nearest doctor 30, across snow-choked country, in weather that kills travellers. And the obsessed tooth, in this century, is not a joke, not an inconvenience. People die of teeth in 1871, the infection tracking down into the throat and chest, and the settlers all know someone. So you are alone in a hole in the ground with a small fire, a swollen face, a rising fever, and a decision that has only bad doors. You do what the country does. You hold whiskey on it, the medicinal pint from the store hoarded since September, and the whiskey helps for an hour at a time. You hold a hot salt bag against your jaw and pace the 12 feet of your floor. Turn 12 feet. Turn hour after hour through 2 nights, the fire ticking, the wind moaning its one note, and somewhere in the 2nd night, pacing, half out of your head, you catch yourself bargaining out loud, with the tooth, with the winter, with God, in Norwegian, offering absurdities, promising church attendance, and you hear yourself doing it and you laugh, one cracked bark of laughter, and the laughing splits the ache wide open and brings tears to your eyes. And that is the bottom of the winter, right there. A boy laughing and crying alone in the dark at his own madness, 12 feet at a time. On the 3rd morning the abscess points, and you do the thing you've been circling for 2 days. You strop your knife. You boil it. You don't know why. Nobody yet knows why. But your mother did it and her mother did it, and the old wisdom is ahead of the science by a century. You prop the little shaving mirror against the lamp, and with your left hand steadying your own jaw, and your right hand steadier than it has any right to be, you lance it, and the relief that follows the pain is so enormous, so total, that your knees give, and you sit down on the floor right where you stand and lean your head back against the sod wall and breathe and breathe and breathe. The tooth itself comes out in March, in town, pulled by the blacksmith, who is the township's dentist the way he is its surgeon and veterinarian. $1, a chair tipped back against the shop wall, his apprentice holding your shoulders, 40 seconds you will decline to describe in any letter for the rest of your life. But the tooth is not the lesson. The lesson is the 2 nights of pacing, and it is the last hard lesson of the first winter, and it is this. Everything else this year, the sod, the fire, the blizzards, the wolves, attacked the claim and you defended it. This attacked you, inside the walls, past every guard and rope, and there was no neighbour for it and no ploughed ring against it, and you found out what is at the very bottom of a settler when everything else is stripped away. A body, a knife, and the willingness to use the second on the first. You would have given a great deal not to learn that. You will be quietly, permanently different for knowing it. Twice that winter, the rope and the sky watching save your life outright. The wind never stops. It moans over the stovepipe in a low hollow note that rises and falls hour after hour, and it hisses the dry snow across the crust above your head with a sound like sand pouring on paper, and some nights it gets into your skull the way water gets into a boot. This is when you understand the prairie madness stories from the inside. You talk to yourself now and don't notice. You read your entire library, a Bible, an almanac, and a 4-month-old Norwegian newspaper from Wisconsin, so many times that you can recite shipping advertisements from Chicago like scripture. You do sums in your head. You name the kings of Norway. You whittle. You mend harness that doesn't need mending, taking the stitches out and putting them back, for the smell of the leather and the pull of the waxed thread through your fingers, for something, anything, that pushes back against the moaning dark. On the clear nights between storms you climb out and stand in air so cold it feels solid, under stars so thick and close they look wet, and sometimes the whole northern sky ripples green and white, the aurora, same lights you knew as a boy over the fjord, and that undoes you worse than the wind does, because the lights are the same, and everything else in your life is not. Twice that winter, the rope and the sky watching save your life outright. Once in January, when a morning of soft still snow turns in 20 minutes, into a shrieking white wall while you're in the stable, and you haul yourself home along 50 feet of rope leaning at 45 degrees against the wind, and the door of your own house appears out of the white exactly 1 arm's length before you strike it. And once in February, coming back from the Novaks with a borrowed auger, when you see the northwest horizon turn a strange soft grey, and feel the wind pause, hitch, and swing. And because Frantisek's finger is tattooed on the inside of your mind, watch the sky tell you everything. You turn around and you run, and you're inside their door with the latch dropped for 1 full hour before the blizzard arrives. That will kill. That same week, elsewhere on this frontier, travellers and mail carriers and at least 1 settler found in the spring melt 1/2 mile from his own door. You stay at the Novaks 3 days, snowed in, and they are the finest 3 days of the winter. It is on the second of those nights that you finally hear Frantisek's own story, and it explains everything about him, and it is the last teaching this year will give you. The children are asleep. The blizzard is working on the house, patient, enormous. The sod walls swallowing its scream down to a deep muffled moaning, snow hissing at the window glass like thrown sand. Marie sews by the candle. František packs his pipe and packs it again, and then, in his slow assembled English, with Marie quietly passing him words when he runs aground, he tells you about his own first winter, 7 years back, further east, on the first claim, the one before this one. They came in autumn, too late, and they knew it was late, and they came anyway, because the passage money was spent and there was nowhere to winter. Him, Marie, and the 2 children they had then. The dugout half finished when the first blizzard caught them. Provisions bought on credit at prices he still recites like a curse. And in February the smallest one, the girl, took sick, fever, then the cough, the bad cough, and the doctor 30 miles, and the snow neck deep in the drawers, and no road, and no rope to hold to for 30 miles. He went anyway. He tells this part with his eyes on the pipe smoke, walking out at midnight into a clearing sky and cold, like the inside of iron, 30 miles in 19 hours, and the doctor good. The doctor came, the doctor did everything. He turns his hand over, palm up, empty. It was too late 3 days before our walk, he says. Doctor say this. Nobody's fault, he say. The candle fusses. Marie has stopped sewing but does not look up. First year here, František says, I hate this country, hate the grass, hate the wind, hate the sky. I want to burn it and go home. He draws on the pipe. But home has nothing. Home is why we come. So, he shrugs. The heaviest shrug you've ever seen a man make. So we stay. We learn. Everything I teach you, the sky, the rope, the guards, the going ground, you understand now where I learn it. You understand. Country is good country, he says, and he says it without irony, without bitterness, flatly, like a surveyor reporting a measurement. Best soil in world, free, but it is teacher who beats the students. You learn fast, or... The empty palm again. Then he refills your coffee and reaches for the soft worn cards and deals, because that is the other thing this country teaches. You say the unsayable once straight, and then you play cards, because the stove needs feeding, and tomorrow needs facing, and grief that is walked around daily wears a path you can live beside. You lose 11 beans to him that night, and consider it the cheapest tuition ever paid. On the last night František refills your coffee, looks at you a long moment through the pipe smoke, and delivers his verdict on your first year. The highest praise you will receive on this frontier, 4 words. You still here. Good. You still here. That is the entire examination, and you passed it. And then, one day in late March, you step out of the dugout and something is different, and it takes you a moment to find it. The wind is coming from the south. It is soft. It smells of wet earth. Water is ticking and trickling somewhere under the snow crust. 1,000 tiny voices, and within a week the white world is a brown one. The sloughs stand full and blue, and one morning you hear a sound overhead like far-off dogs, and you look up, and the sky is full of wavering lines from horizon to horizon. Geese, thousands upon thousands, rivers of them pouring north hour after hour, day after day, and you stand outside your hole in the ground, with your ruined hands and your wind-burned face watching them, and you find that you're grinning like a fool at the sky. You made it, May to May, 1 full turn. There is one more thing you must understand about this year, and it is the thing your letters home never mention, and the thing the land office pamphlets never mention, and the thing that will take you years to fully see, though the evidence has been under your plough since the first furrow. The land was not empty. You knew it in the abstract before you came, everyone did. But abstraction is one thing, and it is another thing entirely to be walking your own broken field in June and see, turned up by the plough and washed clean by rain, lying on the black soil like a dropped word, a stone arrowhead, perfectly made, notched, edged, patient. You pick it up and stand there with it in your ruined palm, and the abstraction ends. Someone napped this, here, on a day with weather in it, a person with a name, and lost it or left it, and the grass closed over it, and it waited. You will find more. A scraper, a hammerstone, once a whole spear point of pale flint that František examines and hands back without a word. And you keep them in a cigar box on the shelf, and you do not have at 20 any framework for what they make you feel. Not guilt exactly, not yet. The century has not offered you that vocabulary, something more like vertigo. The sensation of discovering that the floor you stand on is a ceiling. Because here is what is true in 1870 and 1871, in plain terms, while you are proving up your quarter section. This ground was Sioux ground, Yankton and Lakota country, and it passed to the United States by treaty within living memory, treaties signed under pressures you are only dimly aware of and will understand better and less comfortably when you are old. The people themselves are not gone from the territory. They are west and north of you, on reserved lands along the Missouri and beyond it, and the men in the saloon talk of the unceded country toward the Black Hills, the way men talk of weather building on a horizon. The buffalo that fed this whole world are already broken into two great dying herds, and the hide hunters are working on them the way you worked on the sod, industrially, and the bones, you have seen this with your own eyes at the depot. The bones are freight. Wagon loads of buffalo bones, bleached white, stacked beside the tracks like cordwood, bought by the ton, shipped east to be ground for fertilizer and char, and settlers gather them off the prairie for cash money in hard years, and some families out here will survive their first winter on bone money, picking the country's previous life up off the ground and selling it by weight. And beneath your own grass, everywhere, the older tenants, you plough up buffalo bones every season, horn cores and great weathered vertebrae, and once an entire skull that you set on a post by the stable where it stares west. The wallows, those saucer depressions scattered across your claim where the herds rolled and dusted themselves for 1,000 years, hold rainwater in the spring, and the first flowers come up around their rims, and you mow around them without quite deciding to. You are not the villain of this story, and you're not innocent of it either, and the honest place to stand is exactly where you do stand. A poor man from a poor valley, given land by a government that first took it, ploughing under one world at 2.5 miles an hour to plant another, and finding the first world's toolkit in your furrow. The Homestead Act that saved your family's line, and the treaties that broke other families' lines, are clauses of the same document. That is the deed to your quarter section, the full deed, the one the land office does not print, and part of proving up, the real proving up, the kind that takes longer than 5 years, is learning to hold the whole of it in your head without flinching or looking away. The railroad, meanwhile, is coming, and the railroad is the engine under everything. It reached the river towns before you did. The surveyor's stakes are already marching across the townships to the west, and in the saloon, and the store and the churchyard, the talk is always the same talk. Which line, which route, whose land the depot will touch and turn to gold. In the next 4 years, the rails will crawl out across this territory, and the ones beside it, dragon towns behind them like beads on a string, each one born in a summer, depot, water tank, store, saloon, church, school, in that exact order, and the 14-mile trip that eats your day will shrink to 6, and then to 4, and the world that took you 11 months to reach will be 24 hours from Chicago. You are not settling a wilderness, whatever the pamphlets say. You are the leading edge of a machine of iron and law and wheat prices reaching west at fixed speed, and the grass and the buffalo and the treaty lines are all giving way before it together, and you, walking behind your oxen, are both its beneficiary and its blade. None of this is in your head on the first warm Sunday of that new May. On the first warm Sunday you're just a young man with a free morning. But it is all under your feet, and the second spring begins with the finest work of your life, sowing wheat into ground that is finally truly yours. The sod you broke last May has spent a year dying into soil. When you cross-plough it now in April, it turns soft and crumbling and black, the root mat rotted through, and the plough runs sweet and silent where last year it tore and bucked. The difference between the two is the whole story of your year, told through the handles into your hands. You harrow it fine. And then you sow, and you sow the old way, the way your father sowed and his father, because seed drills cost money you will not have for years. A canvas sack slung from your shoulder, heavy with seed wheat, and you walk your field in measured strides, broadcasting with your right hand, a flat sweeping cast at every second step, the wheat leaving your fingers in a hissing golden fan, pattering down on the black earth like fine rain. Stride, cast, stride, cast. The rhythm of it is ancient and hypnotic, and your body falls into it as if it had been waiting. 10 pounds of the future thrown into the air with every dozen steps. There is a moment in the middle of that sowing that you will keep for the rest of your life without ever telling anyone. You stop to refill the sack from the wagon, and you stand a moment resting, and you look at what is around you. The black seeded field behind, the black waiting field ahead, the green prairie beyond both, running to the rim of the world, your dugout with its grass roof going green again, your stable, your well sweep, your rope, smoke from your own morning fire still climbing thin and blue out of the pipe. A meadowlark is singing on a fence post. You have a fence post now, 4 of them, the beginning of a chorale. That pouring, liquid, falling song that is the whole voice of the prairie spring. The air smells of turned earth and seed dust and the far-off green of 100,000 acres growing, and your hands resting on the sack are your father's hands. You noticed it this winter, and it startles you again now. The same cracked knuckles, the same seams of black, the same shape of grip. 19 last May. 20 now, 4,000 miles from his field, sowing your own. You will harvest that wheat in August, and the harvest deserves to be lived through, because it is the year's whole argument settled in 10 days. It begins with watching. Through July, the wheat goes through its changes like a slow fire. Green, then a green washed with silver when the wind turns the leaves, then the heads filling and nodding, then the first gold coming up from the ground into the stems. And you walk the field's edge every single evening, rolling a head between your palms, biting a kernel to feel it give. Milk, then soft dough, then hard. And all through those weeks you live with your stomach slightly clenched, because a hailstorm now, a hot wind now, a fire now, takes everything, and the whole township lives the same way, and men greet each other in these weeks with the same two words, half joke and half prayer. Still standing. Then one morning the kernel cracks between your teeth instead of denting, and it is time, and everything else in life stops. Cutting with a cradle, scythe is mowing raised to a craft. The cradle is a scythe with 4 long wooden fingers mounted above the blade, so that each stroke not only cuts the wheat but catches it, lays it in a gathered sheaf's worth on the fingers, and a twist of the body at the end of the arc deposits it in a neat swath, heads all one way, ready for binding. Done right, it is beautiful, a walking, swinging, gathering dance. Done wrong, it is chaos, tangled straw and shattered heads and grain on the ground. And grain on the ground is bread lost, and you do it wrong for one full instructive morning until Frantisek, who has walked over for exactly this reason, takes the cradle from you and shows you. And the difference between your stroke and his stroke is the difference between a boy writing and a clerk writing. And you watch his hips and his wrists for an hour, and then you have it, mostly. And your body spends the next 9 days making up the rest. Binding follows the cradler, and binding is Marie and the 2 oldest Novak children, because harvest erases the property lines. This week the township is one farm with scattered fields, and every household follows the ripening from claim to claim. Your wheat this week, Frantisek's barley the next, the Hendersons after, labour swapped and tallied loosely in a ledger nobody writes down and nobody cheats. The binders gather each swathe armful, twist a band from the straw itself. A flick of the wrist you practice 40 times before it stops falling apart. And cinch the sheaf tight, and the sheaves are stood in shocks 10 and 2, little golden tents dotting the stubble in long rows, and the stubble itself is a fact your forearms will carry for a month. Stiff-cut straws at exactly wrist height, raking you with every armful until both arms are cross-hatched red from cuff to elbow, stinging in the sweat. And nobody complains because everybody's arms look the same, and there is a name for those marks in every language in the township, and in every language it is a badge. The days are furnace days, and they are the best days of your year. That is the paradox everyone who has harvested knows and no one who hasn't quite believes. Up at 4, cutting by first light while the straw is tough with dew, the heat building, the water jug wrapped in wet sacking under a shock passed hand to hand, the noon meal spread in the field's edge shade of the wagon, Marie's bread, cold duck, pickles, coffee, and the talk and the flat jokes and the 10-minute sleep face down on stubble with your hat over your neck, then cutting again till the light dies. Your hands go past soreness into a kind of wooden competence, and all around you, all day, the year's whole meaning is being physically stacked up in the sun, food standing in rows where there was grass. Threshing comes in September, and threshing is the machine age arriving at your claim in person. A custom crew works the township, the machine itself, a horsepower sweep with 8 teams walking their eternal circle, gears groaning, tumbling rod spinning across the stubble to the thresher, and the thresher roaring and shaking and eating sheaves whole, straw blasting out one end onto the growing stack and out of the spout at the side in a hissing amber stream. Wheat. Clean wheat. Pouring into the half-bushel measure, and a man tallying each dump aloud, and you stand at the spout with your hands cupped in the stream. You cannot help it. No one at their first threshing can. Letting the cool, sliding weight of it run through your fingers, the sum of the sod and the hail and the fire and the winter, running through your fingers at last in a form you can sell and store and eat. The tally when the machine falls silent at dusk, 140 bushels off 9 acres of second-year ground. A modest crop, the thresherman says, fair for new breaking. You nod judiciously, agreeing that it is modest, and inside your chest bells are ringing. You will haul that wheat 14 miles to the buyer and come home with actual banknotes folded inside your shirt. The first money this land has ever paid you. $41 after the thresherman's cut and the store debt, and you will sit up half the night at the table just looking at it, not because it is much, but because of what it proves. The land answers, slowly, cruelly, taking its year of blood first, but it answers. And one more thing takes root that second summer, and it starts small enough. A Sunday meeting in the Novak's yard, then in a granary, 11 adults and a swarm of children, a borrowed hymnal, prayers in 3 languages taken in turns. By fall there is a subscription paper going claim to claim, $2, $1, 50 cents, a day's hauling pledged, and your own name on it for $2 you genuinely cannot spare. And the winter after, on a knoll by the section road, the township raises its first building that exists for no economic reason at all, a sod church, 20 feet by 30, whitewashed inside, plank benches, a bell ordered from Chicago that will take a year to arrive, and will ring for the first time on an Easter morning with the whole scattered congregation standing outside in the mud to hear it. And when it rings, a small bell, a cheap bell, thin and bright across the wet spring miles, there will not be a dry adult eye on that knoll, yours included, because every single one of them left bells behind, in Norway and Bohemia and Sweden and the Rhineland. And for years the wind out here carried nothing human at all, and now, on Sundays, it carries this. That is how a place becomes a place. Not the ploughing, the bell. On the first warm Sunday of that new May, before the sowing, you do something you've never once had time to do. You walk to the highest ground on your claim, a long low swell in the northeast corner, hardly a hill, maybe 30 feet above the rest of the world, and you climb it, and you stand at the top and you look. 30 feet does not sound like much. Out here it is a throne. From 30 feet on clear spring air you can see 15, maybe 20 miles. And what you see is this: green. New grass running to every horizon, moving in long, slow waves under the wind, the light chasing across it in ripples the way it chases across water, so that the whole earth seems to breathe. Last year's fire is invisible. Last winter's graves of snow are invisible. Southwest, a thread of smoke stands off the horizon. The town, 14 miles, the railroad, the world. East, a smaller thread, the Novak's chimney, Marie cooking Sunday dinner. And below you, in the middle of all that ocean, one dark rectangle of ploughed land, one dugout with a grass roof, one sod stable, one rope still stretched between them, 2 red oxen grazing, and a scatter of white hens. That is everything you have made, and from up here you can cover it with your thumb. A year ago that would have crushed you. It doesn't now, because you also know what your thumb is covering. 26 feet of well, 10 acres broken, and 10 more to break this month, and the first year sod rotted down now into seedbed, real seedbed, and wheat going into it. Actual wheat, a cash crop, a future. A ring of ploughed guards that held against the worst thing you ever saw. A stable that kept 2 oxen alive through 30 below. You know things now that cannot be covered with a thumb. You know what the northwest sky means in every one of its moods. You know how to twist hay and rope a rick and backburn a guard and find your own door blind in a screaming white dark. You know that neighbour at 4 miles is closer than a stranger at 4 feet ever was. You know the exact sound a bull snake makes in stove ashes, and the exact smell of rain 3 hours out. and the exact weight of a 50-pound sod slab at the end of a 12-hour day. And you know this, standing on your 30-foot mountain, and it is the thing the letters home never quite managed to say. The prairie has not gotten kinder. It has not noticed you. It will send hail again, and fire again, and it will send worse. There are years coming, you don't know it yet, when the sky itself will glitter, and the grasshoppers will come down in clouds that block the sun and eat the wheat, the garden, the curtains, the handles of pitchforks, everything, whole counties stripped in days. It will send blizzards in this decade with names that will still be spoken 100 years from now. Some of the families filing claims this very spring will not last 18 months. More homestead claims on this frontier will be abandoned than proved. The land office ledgers are full of names the grass grew over, but you still hear. And 40 years from now, because you will get your 40 years, Niels, you are one of the ones who does. There will be a white frame house where the dugout was, with a porch and a windbreak of planted cottonwoods grown taller than the house, and a red barn, and a county road along your section line, and a telephone wire, and church bells on Sunday from a steeple you helped raise. And your children will be Americans who complain about walking half a mile to a schoolhouse. And you will never once tell them the whole of it, because there are no words for the whole of it, and because some part of you will remain forever a 19-year-old standing alone in chest-high grass, watching a wagon disappear. But that is all far away. Tonight is just tonight. Tonight you walk back down the swell in the long gold evening light, and you do the chores. Your hands do them. They hardly need you anymore. The stable smell, warm and grassy and animal. The chuckle of the hens settling. The squeak of the well windlass, and the cold clay taste of your own water. You cook your mush and your salt pork, and you eat in the doorway of the dugout facing west, watching the sun go down into the grass in that slow copper fire that still, after a full year, stops your breath a little every single time. The dark comes up out of the east like a tide, the first stars. The land gives back its heat, and the air turns cool and sweet, and the frogs start up in the slough. Thousands of them, a pulsing silver ringing that fills the whole bowl of the night, and under it the wind moves through the new grass with the soft summer hiss again, the sound of 1,000,000 acres breathing. Sit with it a moment before you go in. This is the hour the prairie keeps for itself, and for whoever has earned it. The nighthawks are up, invisible, their booming dives coming out of the dark overhead. That strange hollow vroom of air through feathers that startled you witless the 1st June and is only company now. A late meadowlark tries half its song and thinks better of it. Somewhere far off, so far it is more feeling than sound, a dog barks twice at the Novaks. Even their dog is a neighbour, and falls silent. The smells sort themselves out of the cooling air one by one, and you know every single one of them now the way you once knew the smells of your mother's kitchen. The green breathing of the wheat, the mineral coolness rising off the ploughed land, wood smoke thinning from your own pipe, the wet sweetness of the slough, and under everything, always, the smell of the grass itself, 10,000 years deep. A year ago this darkness was an enemy that surrounded you. Now it is a room you live in, and you know where everything is. You bank the stove, you pull off your boots, that groan of relief in your ankles the same every night, the day's weight leaving through your feet. You lie down on the grass mattress in your house made of earth, in the smell of soil and root and smoke that means, now simply, home. Your body settles piece by piece, the way a wagon settles when the load comes off. Your hands ache their low, familiar ache. Your back lets go one slow muscle at a time. The blanket warms. The dark in the dugout is soft and total, and the sounds come to you gently through 2 feet of living earth. The frogs, the wind, an ox shifting his feet in the stable, the small ticking of the cooling stove. You are fed enough. You are warm enough. You are safe enough. You have water under your own land and seed in your own ground, and hay in the rick and a rope to the stable, and a light 4 miles east if you ever need it. That is more than the boy on the ship dared to hope for. That is more than most people on this whole raw frontier have tonight. That is enough. Tomorrow there will be sod to break. Tomorrow there will be the plow and the oxen and the long straight furrows that go nowhere and build everything. Tomorrow there will be the northwest sky to watch, the way there always will be. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this, the mattress, the dark, the frogs ringing in the slough, the wind in the grass, the slow heavy sweetness pulling you down. The sounds grow fainter. Or maybe you're just listening less. Somewhere out on the black prairie the wind keeps moving, mile after empty mile, touching nothing made by hands until it reaches the Novak's roof, and then nothing again until the town, and then nothing again all the way to the mountains. And under that wind, in a hole in the ground, one small human heartbeat, slowing. Centuries will pass. The prairie you know will change beyond recognition. The grass will go under the plough, horizon to horizon, until only ragged remnants remember what an ocean of it looked like. The sod houses will melt back into the earth they came from. The trails will become roads, the roads will become highways, and machines will cross in 5 hours the distance that took you 11 months. The blizzards will still come, but they will howl around double-glazed windows and furnace-warmed rooms, and the fires will meet pavement and ploughed fields and engines full of water. But people will still live there, still work that black soil, still stop what they're doing when a cloud bank builds in the northwest. Still lie awake at night and hear the wind come 1,000 miles to find them, and feel small and feel free, both at once, the way you do. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for shelter when the wind blows, that doesn't change. The need for one light on the horizon that means you are not alone, that doesn't change either. And the need for rest at the end of a long day, that least of all. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Niels Haugen in his dugout under the Dakota grass 1.5 centuries ago, with the frogs ringing and the wind combing the prairie and the whole enormous night standing guard. Let the world fade. Let the wind quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. You've earned it the same as he did, by getting up this morning and doing the day and making it back to your bed. You still here? Good. Take your rest, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.